If you could pass on knowledge or wisdom that could survive a societal collapse, what would it be? That's the sort of question that's posed in this book, The Fifth Season, which I mentioned in a prior video. But I sped read through this entire trilogy at the beginning of this year. I absolutely loved it. It's the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. It takes place in a world called the Stillness, which is this big supercontinent that you see in this awesome fantasy map there. And the basic structure of the universe or the world in which these stories take place, is that the Earth itself is unstable. And there are 5 seasons, the four that we know, and the fifth season, which is just death, because there's always some major geological calamity that occurs that essentially resets human society or sets it back significantly. That is the world in which the stories take place. And there are a number of things that are consistent with a number of other fantasy stories. There's certainly stratified classes of people. There is a group of people called Origines, which are able to control the earth and stop things like earthquakes, also start them if they don't know how to control themselves. So they become an oppressed class. But one of the things that's interesting about the series that there is not really religious groups or religions per se. There is certainly received wisdom, there are superstitions, but a sort of religious class doesn't necessarily exist aside from around various groups that try to control Origines, which are just people that happen to be born with this ability to control the earth. However, one of the things that does survive over time is something that they call stone lore, which are just this advice that has survived through all of these collapses to the present day, is practiced in every community, which they call comms. An example from these are usually like epigraphs or the beginnings of chapters or the ends sometimes. One example is from a tablet called On Survival that says, "Beware ground on loose rock, beware hill strangers, beware sudden silence," which would be useful in a world that doesn't have any predictable seasons, or where normalcy is not guaranteed. So I'm curious what you all think would be some stone lore that you would pass on in a world that is increasingly unstable, that is increasingly not dependable. What is the stone lore that you would want to pass on? The interesting wrinkle to what makes this a very successful fantasy world is that over time you realize the pieces of history that were elided or obscured in order to reify the powers that be, the powers that survive these various fifth seasons of death, whether it's the Empire or the other groups that seek to control Origines. So that in and of itself is a very interesting addition to this this piece of work. This is something that I explored. These sorts of things are something I explored in an essay series called "The Comfort of Fictional Religions" a few years ago. It was then on Substack, now on my own site, but I'm very enamored with the ways in which singular authors put forth ideas like this. And stone lore is one that is successful even in a world that does not necessarily have religion in the same way that ours does. So, if you could pass something on, what would your stone lore be? Let me know in the comments.